All right, are you an absolute beginner at the piano? Well, I think I can help you. We're going to learn in this first section how to identify the keys. Now, if you already know this, you can fast forward to the next section. When you look at the keyboard, you're going to see groupings of black notes, and there's 2 black notes, then 3 black notes, and then 2 black notes, and then 3 black notes, right? You see that all the way across the keyboard. So use that as a way to identify the names of these notes. So let's just start in the middle of the keyboard where we see these 2 black notes. Okay, now the white note that is to the left of the 2 black notes is called C. And this is why this is referred to as middle C, because it's right in the middle of the keyboard. All right, so middle C to the left of the 2 black notes. Then, if we look at what is to the right of the 2 black notes, that is the letter E. So C, D, and E. You can see it's just the letters of the alphabet, right in order. C, D, E. So if we were to then say, okay, I can identify the C, and I can identify the E, clearly the D falls right in between them. Now let's look at the group of the 3 black notes. To the left of it is F, and to the right of it is B. And you think, how can it be B? Well, remember, C, D, E, F, G. Now after G, it starts over at the letter A, B. Okay, so C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and there is our whole octave. Okay, now, again, if you're an absolute beginner, this is important to understand. Probably many of you are not an absolute beginner, and that's why you may have skipped past this section. All right, so another really good way to start to be able to make music at the keyboard is to not think of these notes by their letter name necessarily, but to think of them as a number. Okay, so what if we gave the note C, if we gave it the value of 1? Okay, so if this would be 1, then this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then when we run into that same note to the left of the 2 black notes, we're back to 1. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Now 1 is sometimes referred to as 8, right? An octave stretch, you would be on 1 and 8. It's really the same note. Okay, so that's kind of understanding this little bit of understanding the layout of the keyboard. Now, of course, there's all these other black notes, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those. So if we have 7 white notes and these 5 black notes, 7 and 5 is 12, right? So that's where there's 12 different notes. So let's think of when you're thinking of these black notes, think of it as if I'm moving up the keyboard and I go up to a black note, then it's considered a sharp. If I'm coming down the keyboard, let's say, and I go to that, now I would think of this moving down, it would be a flat. Okay, so that's why there's some confusion with newer musicians, if you want to call it that, right? So somebody learning music at the keyboard, and the same note can be called 2 different things. In other words, this could be called a D sharp, could also be called an E flat. So in the context of what you're doing, you might think of that as a D sharp, but in a moving down manner, you would think of it as an E flat. Okay, and there's probably some other reasons why you might call one that same note one thing versus the other, but let's not get into that so much. All right, so we've got our 1, our sharp 1, our 2, our sharp 2, our 3. Now there's no black note in between the E and the F. Okay, so then we can just think of it as going to the 4, the sharp 4, the 5, the sharp 5, the 6, the sharp 6, the 7, and then we're back to 1. All right, so we're understanding that, and let's move on. Now let's take a look at if we wanted to create some chords. Okay, now a chord is when you're playing at least two notes. But we often think of a chord as a triad, 3 notes. Okay, so like a C major triad are these 3 notes. And when we play these 3 notes, we can look at the relationship between these notes in terms of how far away are they from each other. Okay, one of the reasons the key of C is used a lot is because it's very easy to see in that all the notes in the C major scale are white notes, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C, right? And you've probably heard of the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? And get you back to where you started. So when we look at, if we were to take the distance of this triad, right, what do we notice about it? There's a white note in between each of the notes we're pressing down. So C, I skip a white note, E, I skip a white note, and G. Now if we kept that same shape and we just move down the keyboard, so let's say we'll call this the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're back to the 1. Okay, so these, for the purpose of what we're trying to understand right now, we can look at it as all I need to know is I play a note, I skip a note. I play a note, I skip a note, I play a note. Okay, there's my C triad, or my 1 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1. Okay, now in the left hand, let's say we wanted to just hold an octave stretch. So I've got the C in my pinky and I've got the C in my thumb. And you're starting to get the muscle memory of how to create this shape in your hand, right? How to hold an octave stretch and just move the hand without moving the fingers closer or further apart. And just be able to do that, right? And then in the right hand, keeping that same triad shape. And then timing them together. Maybe coming back down. Yeah. So if we want to make some music, we need to be able to move that hand shape up and down the keyboard. So one of the first things you should do is practice doing that, right? And you can either do it in both hands, right? Where you have, let's say, I'll keep my hands closer together. There's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's triads in each hand moving up the piano. Then do it going down. And this isn't a very exciting exercise, but if you're just getting started, it's really important. It's important to train your hand how to make that shape, be able to move it confidently. Whether you're looking at the keyboard, or the next phase would be to be able to move it without really looking. Right? 'Cause, 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 because you know about how far to move your hand, and your hand is going to stay in the same shape. Another thing that I think is valuable to practice is this octave stretch, like we talked about before. So what if I was doing the triad shape in my right hand, the octave shape in my left hand? Just going up and down. Now another thing is we can take this triad shape and play the notes one at a time instead of striking them all at the same time. Right, you can do it like that. Now if you use your sustain pedal, you can hear how the sound is sustained, and if I take my hand away from the keyboard, that sound is sustained, right? It's still there. Where if I wasn't using the pedal, right, it's not sustaining those notes. So one of the things that beginners, brand new at the keyboard, they make the mistake of they leave their foot on the pedal, which sounds great when you're in the same chord. But if I keep moving to different chords and I forget to pick my foot up off the pedal, it all mashes together, right? So it sounds very muddy or very, garbaged up. So if I go from, the way you want to practice this is if I'm holding the sustain pedal down while I'm on the 1, as soon as I go to the 2, I lift it up and put it back down. Lift it up, put it back down, right? Like whenever you want the keys to stop holding the sound, you lift it up, and then that kind of stops those notes from being sustained. And then if you put it back down right afterwards, whatever you play from that point forward is going to be sustained. So I'm sustaining the 1. I just did a quick up and down. Now I'm sustaining the 2. Now the 3. The 4. The 5. The 6. The 7, right? So in doing so, you're practicing a lot at the same time, right? You're practicing this idea of the triad chord shape in root position. You're practicing, and by in root position, what that really means is your thumb being the lowest note in the chord is the chord that you're talking about, right? So if we're playing a C major, I'm in root position here. Now, remember, these notes are going to repeat themselves on the keyboard. So if I'm in root position here, and I try to rearrange these notes out of the C, the E, and the G, if I start moving up the keyboard, which note do I run into first? I run into the C again, right? So what if instead of having the C be my thumb, what if the C were my pinky? Well, I would still need those other 2 notes, right? I would still need the G and the E. So when we move up the keyboard, the first note we run into is the C, and then we still have to play these other 2 notes. So depending on what fingering you like is, let's just say we keep the same 3 fingers. But now you notice, like this shape, if I put my pinky on the C, that doesn't create another C chord, right? That shape is not big enough to hit the right notes. So you have to stretch your hand differently for the first inversion of the C chord. So if I'm making the root position, I have this shape. If I'm making the first inversion, I make this shape. Or I like this shape. I use a different finger. And then if we continue to move up the keyboard, So now we've had our pinky on the G. We've had our pinky on the C. What hasn't our pinky been on? It hasn't been on the E yet. So if we continue to move up the keyboard, right? Now we do need to use those. Well, not that we need to, but it feels the best using the same 3 fingers you used in the root position. Every other finger, right? Every other white note, every other finger. You can do that when you go to first inversion. And you definitely should do that when you go to second inversion. I shouldn't say definitely, but it's probably wise. So root, first inversion, second inversion, back to root. All the same chord. C, C, C. And let's say you wanted to move from one of these chord shapes, let's say the C triad in root position, and then I want to play the next inversion in that same type of arpeggio, meaning one note at a time instead of striking them all at the same time. So I'm going to go from the root position. Now I'm going to play the first inversion. Now I'm going to play the second inversion. And then finally the root. Right? So you can move up the keyboard within the same chord, and you can really start to become familiar with how to identify and then if I change to a different chord, remember right now I'm holding the sustain pedal down, and over time it's just going to disappear because it'll only hold it for so long. But let's say I want to now go to the 4. And then I want to go back to the 1. Now I want to go to the 5. And the 4. And back to the 1. So that was all one hand doing that. Now, another really good exercise is to take this chord shape, right? Root position. Now, root position in your right hand is when the thumb is on the root note, and in the left hand is when the pinky's on the root note. Right? So if we were to take these notes and first play them in our left hand, then play them in our right hand, and just go back and forth. I'll hold the sustain pedal down. Right, something like that. And then also try to move from chord to chord just to kind of get familiar. So again, practicing things that are going to help you get a really good feel of the keyboard, and trying to pack as much into that practice as you can. So this idea of, yes, the chord, but using them as an arpeggio. Moving up the keyboard, and also using the pedal as I was doing there. You see how I'm going to keep the pedal down. You hear how that's just too much going on, right? It's just sustaining all the different chords. And so they layer over the top of each other and they don't sound good. So you have to lift the pedal up, right? So the pedal's down. Then I lift it up and it stops. I put it back down. I lift it up and it stops. I put it back down. Right? Now obviously you don't want that bit of pause in there, so I'll do it now, demonstrating it where I just keep going, right? So much better sounding, right? It's sustaining the notes while I'm on that chord and then stopping it when I immediately start the next chord. So if you just go in order, it sounds somewhat pleasing, but if you start to now improvise the order in which you're going, you start to activate your creative mind, right? And you start to musically get a feeling of what does it sound like when I go from one type of chord to another chord. Now we were just moving right in order. So let's look at it. Let's look at how this will sound if I bounce around a little bit, not just going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and so on, right? This is the 1. 5, 6, 4, 1. 5, 6, 4. So maybe you're starting to hear it, but like that's starting to take on the sound of some popular music, right? A very common chord progression going from the 1 to the 5 to the 6 to the 4. So without trying to jump too far ahead, if we practice using the 3 different notes of our triad and we move up the keyboard, actually crossing our arms over. Okay, so I'm going to move my mic out of the way so I can demonstrate this properly, but watch how I move my hands crossing over and just starting the same. So if you see, I just kind of went in a creative pattern, right? Not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I went from the 1 to the 5 to the 6 to the 4 to the 3. I actually don't remember the exact order I did, but you know, it made it more, a little bit more of a song. So that's a great skill or a great drill. Okay, so maybe start by just going where you cross your hands over and then go to the 2. Go to the 3. Go to the 4. Go to the 5. Go to the 6. The 7. back to the 1. Right, that's going to start to really give you a command of the keyboard in those root positions, both in your left hand and in your right hand. And then you can play around with just making up orders, and you might try something, it doesn't sound good, and so you remember, oh, I'm not going to go from that chord to that chord because it doesn't sound that good. But what sounds good to one person might not sound good to another person. So again, just being creative without thinking too much about it, trying to choose some different chords and experiment with what it sounds like when I go from one chord to another chord, and then trying to determine, do I like the way that sounds, and then you do it more often. So these are great options for you to start to get a command of the keyboard and start to be able to make some music that you are going to enjoy, and that's going to lead us into bigger discussions, of course, on how to add in more complex ideas. If you've watched my videos before this one, you know I have a strong liking for the blues style of music. So check out some of my other videos, and if you thought that this video was valuable, please like it, maybe share it, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.